We'll go ahead and get started. First thing up is request for bill introductions. Senator Schallenberger. Okay, thank you. Committee, any questions? Seeing none, are there any objection? We'll make the request. Thank you. Committee will open the hearing on House Bill 2176. First House bill of the season. Thank you, Amelia.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. House Bill number 2176, as amended by the House Committee on Taxation, would create the Arkansas City Area Public Library District Act and the Udall Area Public Library District Act. New sections 1 through 8 establish the Arkansas City Area Public Library District Act. Specifically, Section 1 defines terms that will be used throughout the Act and establishes the library district to include all the territory located within the boundaries of USD 470. Section 2 allows the current Board of Trustees of the Ark City Public Library to adopt a resolution proposing to create this new library district and stating the proposed tax levy amount for such library district. If the resolution were to be adopted, an election would be held voting on whether to create the proposed library district. Existing contracts and obligations of the Ark City Public Library would become obligations of the Ark City Area Library District. Section 3 provides that if the election approves the new library district, such entity would be governed by a board of 7-member trustees. 4 of those members would be appointed by the governing body of the city of Ark City, with one of the members residing outside the city. The 3 remaining members would be appointed by the Board of Education of USD 470. Members would be appointed for a term of 4 years and could only serve 2 consecutive terms without a break in service. Members would receive no compensation, but would be paid actual and necessary expenses in attending meetings and carrying out their duties. Section 4 would establish the organizational structure of the board. Section 5 requires the free use of the library for residents of the library district. The board may extend the use and privilege of the library to non-residents or to charge a reasonable fee to non-residents. Section 6 allows the board the legal rights to contract, to sue or be sued, acquire, hold, and convey real and personal property. The board may also establish rules for the library, acquire materials, etc. Section 7 requires the library district to prepare an annual budget, to be certified by the USD number 470 Board of Education, subject to a public hearing. Any budget resolution shall state the total tax to be levied for the library district by the Board of Education. Any tax levied would not be considered to be a tax levy of USD 470. The resolution would be required to be published in the official newspaper, and any increase in the tax levy would be subject to a protest petition and election process. Section 8 provides the title of the act. New sections 9 through 16 would establish the Udall Area Public Library District Act. This looks very similar to the act that is in sections 1 through 8, only it provides the terms and establishes the library district as all territory located within the boundaries of USD number 463. And it relates to the city of Udall and would create the Udall Area Public Library District. Very similar terms. Section 17 would amend KSA 75-2554, and it would amend the statute to include the Ark City Area Public Library District Act and the Udall Area Public Library District Act as part of the State Grants and Aid to Libraries Act. The bill would take effect from and after publication in the statute book, and the bill did pass the House on March 2nd on a vote of 110 to 12. And I'd be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So according to this, they would be setting up a board of trustees. But if we're creating a public library district, and it looks like they have to publish their budget, consider amendments, and then it's giving 10 days notice and such. It looks to me like the Board of Trustees would need to be elected officials if they have the same taxing authority power as elected officials. Otherwise, it looks like it might be taxation without representation.
Senator, thank you very much for the question. And that is one of my grave concerns that we have throughout the state. We do have many organizations that are taxation without. So you are correct, and I would ask if you would direct your question to one of the conferees, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah. No, go ahead if you have another question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I was just wondering, so we have a public library in Manhattan, but their budget we have to approve as city elected officials. So who approves their budget in this? Is it an elected official at some level?
Thank you, Amelia.
It appears that the budget is adopted by the library district and is filed with the clerk of the Board of Education of the school district. I do not believe there is language of an approval. It's simply a filing with the board, and then the board levies.
Okay, thank you. Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple quick questions. Thank you, Amelia. So are there other existing library districts in the state?
And I would direct that question to Eddie,
Okay.
and he'll look for it.
Okay, my other
It's a
question.
good question. Thank you.
My other question is, as a former school board member, I know that this seems familiar in the sense of how we funded our local rec center, in that they didn't have taxing authority, but it came through the school district. And this seems very similar. Am I understanding that correctly, or can you speak to that? Are you familiar with the funding for local recreation centers?
Amelia.
And honestly, I would need to look into it. I'm not that familiar with it. It might be something that research might know more, that they might be able to speak to today, or we might have to get back to the committee.
Okay, that would be great.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As it relates to the revenue neutral rate, this will create a new taxing authority. However, it says that the tax collected from landowners would be offset by a reduction, it doesn't use these words, but a reduction in the regional system of cooperating libraries. So how would this dovetail with the revenue neutral rate? Because I'm looking at this saying that it's going to increase property taxes for those in this taxing district. Can you briefly explain that, or if not, we can get an answer later?
Yeah, I might need to look into the interplay on that. I'm not sure exactly how that would work with that particular provision.
If you wouldn't mind, that'd be great. Thank you. Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If, in looking at the Division of Budgets report, if I understand this correctly, it says that, okay, so this, what would be this new library district is currently being served by a regional system. So it would be a reduction in what would go to the regional system. So would that increase the tax liability for the other members of that regional system that this is now cleaving off of? Is that how I
Thank you.
understand?
Yes, that is a good question. I think that might be one that we have to come back to you on, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Amelia and Eddie. Any other questions, committee? Thank you, Amelia. Our first conferee is Mindy Fannensteel. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Can you hear me? Okay. All right, well, thank you. I'm Mindy Faunenstill. I'm the director of the Arc City Public Library. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors. And just to kind of give a brief overview of why we kind of came about working with this bill is that we're currently capped by a city charter ordinance of 6 mills. And we've been capped at that level for decades. It's not likely that our city commission would increase that. And because of inflation, especially after COVID, we're really seeing a rise in costs for services. And it's starting, for a while, we were really worried that we thought we might have to cut services, hours of operation, staffing, because we just couldn't keep up with that. We're also funded 40% less compared to other libraries in the state that serve a similar population size. So we're already, right out of the gate, a little underfunded. Our need for more funding comes from a recent partnership that we've had with the USD 470 Early Literacy Initiative. This is something that was funded by a grant from the Kansas Health Foundation. And we also had a recent compilation of data that was put together by the Kansas Health Institute for the Legacy Regional Community Foundation. We've had this data walk that's been circulating around our committee or our community, and it talks about how poverty impacts health and education. So we have all of this, and as we're kind of working into our strategic planning, we're like, we don't have the financial resources to help address a lot of these issues. And because the Early Literacy Initiative grant ends this year, we're losing a lot of that funding that's really been kind of helping, and we're losing that momentum then afterwards. So we've really been trying to address then how do we focus on these early literacy efforts because we've seen just really dismal data in our community because of that. And then how do we increase access to resources to disadvantaged communities? And we need more staff. We got to have more people, but we don't have enough money to pay for more people. And we need to provide that programming and services. So the library board plans to pass a resolution to levy 5 mills, a tax levy of 5 mills for library services. So this would actually lower taxes for 78% of people within the boundaries of USD 470, because city residents are already used to paying the 6. I believe Monica will speak more to Udall, but Udall pays, I think, 6 points, close to 7 mills in the city, and they're looking to reduce that to 1 in the entire district. So that would lower taxes for 100% of people in that district. And we kind of feel like this would create an equitable tax because these issues of poverty and access to resources aren't just limited to city limits. They're also outside of city limits, especially in our rural areas that we're hoping to serve. Currently, we already serve 2 elementary schools that are outside of city limits. So we're just hoping to create this as a fairer tax. It does operate similarly to a rec center as far as just how all of that governance and the procedures and everything runs. And its passage would really benefit our community. It allows the citizens the opportunity to vote for themselves, whether or not how they want to see library services in their community and how they want to pay for that. So we do have support. I'm not sure if they submitted testimony. We do have support from the city of Arc City, and we have support from USD 470 in this. And so we're hoping for your favorable consideration, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you. Senator Reddy, would you like to?
Yes, actually, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. One, before I come back to the tax one, each community, the mill levy, you get a different revenue for each city, 1 mill. What would 1 mill be in your community? Do you know what that equates to in dollars?
1 mill in our city, I believe, is $60,000-ish, I think.
Okay. And you have 5 mills currently, you said, is dedicated to
We have 6.
6 mills, that's
Yeah.
dedicated to your library?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the questions I had is, when I was looking through the material provided, in the city of Manhattan, we also are under the city, but when we get the budget from the library, we approve or have that discussion. They don't go to the public. The library comes to us for approval of the budget. So here, it looks like your Board of Trustees would be making that decision, or they would be appointed by your school district and your city. So would they provide the budget to USD, to your school district as well as your city for approval, or are they going out to the public for approval of their budget? Who are they responding to? Who is responsible for the library's budget if this should move forward?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that because it runs similarly to the Rec Commission, it does run through the school district, and then that does go out to the public. I think that we would have to run our own budget hearings and our own revenue neutral rate hearings as well.
Sorry, one more question, thank you.
Yes, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So when you say our own, what does that mean? The library?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
All right, because typically we don't have a public hearing for our public library, so that's what I was wondering about. Thank you, I appreciate your responses.
Sure.
Thank you. Any other questions, committee? Senator Erickson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for being here. Just a couple of questions. I'm looking at the fiscal note, and there's a couple of things as I just glanced through this. The State Board of Education indicates property owners in USD 470 would pay additional taxes, the amount depending on the mill, and that one mill would generate $112,654, and you're wanting 5 mills, which would be approximately $560,000, which, if I'm looking correctly at your testimony, in 2022, that's well over double your current amount. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correctly. And that's actually gets us closer to that average of what other libraries in the state our size already is funded. We have a community, Winfield, just 30 minutes north of us, and I think their tax receipts were $540,000 for the year. And so at that time, during that year, we were getting 370. And I think that's just based on they have higher tax valuation.
Follow up if I may.
Senator-
So is the 5 mills in addition to the cap that you're getting from the city?
No.
No.
It would
Yes, okay.
change, right. Yeah, we would no longer get the 6 from the city.
Okay, and then I do have another question. And also in the fiscal note, it seems that there's an issue with the state library and how that affects the South Central Kansas library system. Can you speak to the issue there?
Yes, so residents that live outside of city limits, they do pay, I believe it's 1.229 mills for library services. And the purpose of that is to help fund other libraries. We get some of that money back through grants, technology services, administrative services, staff training. So that money kind of comes back to us. For us, we don't get 100% of that money from our local people who live outside of the city limits. But it is helpful, and I wish we could create this win-win situation, but unfortunately, someone's going to lose some money and someone's going to gain some money, and we're really just kind of trying to focus on our local community and hoping that the increase for us, for our local community in those tax receipts is going to help us more than it's going to be detrimental to the regional system and losing some money.
Thank you. And the dollar amounts they give here is that this new district, should it pass, would receive $27,973 without paying anything into the state system. Is that accurate?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I understand.
Yeah, the fiscal note says the new library district would receive $27,973 in grants and services from the regional system without paying any taxes directly to the system.
Right.
Is that correct?
I guess that would kind of be correct. I mean, the residents that live outside of the city limits now are our non-residents. They would then become our residents if this bill passed, and they would become part of our district. But that still means that we have non-residents who live then beyond the school district boundaries. And so those people paying those regional tax systems for the library, it just all still gets thrown into that pot, and we are able to participate in that regional library system, so.
Thank you. Senator Holland?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mindy, thanks for being here today.
Sure.
Just a couple questions. Let me sure I get this straight in my mind. So you're talking about basically making the local school district the taxing authority, correct?
Exactly, switching from the city to the school.
Just so I understand, the school district already has its own library system for kids. We're talking about basically you're just using them as your taxing authority.
Right.
Okay. Can you tell me, Arc City, the school district, where do they stand in terms of equalization? Are they getting SGF dollars to make up for their budget currently?
So, Senator, would you mind if I ask that question to Eddie?
I will retract the question.
Unless you know it. No,
I
I
do
don't
not
want you to
know.
retract.
Yeah, I do not know.
I just didn't think she would know. So
Right.
if you mind, do we ask?
No, that'd be great.
Eddie, would you mind, would you repeat the question?
Yeah, so the question is that basically, what I want to know is that Arc City, their current school district, are they getting equalization from the state?
Yeah.
And so that's, I guess, one of the questions I have about this is that, are we in essence basically transferring tax liability to basically just state of Kansas taxpayers for this library? That's my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. It's a good question. Any other questions? I would ask the one that Senator Reddy asked earlier. This is taxation without representation. What are your comments on that?
Well, I guess then that would mean that recreation committees also
Yes.
are taxation without
Other
representation, so.
Oh, it's true. It's
yeah.
a major issue.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think it's a major issue, me personally.
right.
And we hope to pick that up. We don't have time this year, but next year to address all of the boards that are taxation without representation. There's over 4,000 taxing authorities in the state of Kansas. Senator Holland?
So, yeah, so back, and I think the request was already made, Madam Chair, but I really want to know how many library districts we have currently that are basically hooked to a school district.
We will make that request of research, but do you know?
I do know Independence Public Library did this in 2002, and they operate very similarly to the way that we're requesting. Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you.
thank you.
Our next conferee is Monica Rupp. Monica, I think you avoided a lot of tough questions. Yeah, okay, go for it.
Okay, hello, my name is Monica Rupp. I am the Udall Public Library Board's president. And I believe that this bill is really important. I mean, I know it's important to their community, but it's really important to ours too. Our town has been with a really poor library for many, many years. My son grew up being homeschooled a lot of the time, and one of our resources for homeschool material was requesting it through our library and trying to find out whatever any other materials that we could get through the library. But the library was very dark. I mean, literally dark. It was outdated, very small. Nobody was using it anymore. I mean, a handful of people, but the town decided in about 2017, they started applying for a grant to try to get a new building for the library because it had been promised a long time ago that they would house them in a new building. But it had been shared with the museum building for, I don't know how many years, like 40, 30 years. And so they'd been promised a new building a long time before that. And our town had a pretty big division over building a new library, but they went to an election, they voted to do it. There was actually, I believe, a recall election, and it won only by a few votes. But they went ahead and the city committed to building a new library that was also housed with a doctor's office and like a fitness center. So we're all in the same building now. But that planning started in 2017. And just at the beginning of last year, we were able to move into that building. Prior to that, we decided, since the town took a big risk in our future by paying like $500,000 matching grant for a town of 658 people that we really needed to give back to them. So we made huge changes. Our books didn't have spine labels, you know, the F over like the author's first three last letters. They didn't have spine labels. We put spine labels on them. We were not automated. We were still on the card checkout system. So we barcoded every book in the library, actually got a really, really cheap program. It's $99 a year to actually have an online card catalog. Never had a website till last year. So we made these huge changes to try to prove that we were, you know, thankful that our town took the investment in us. And it's been kind of a miracle in a way, because in 2021, we literally had 500 people total come in our library. I mean, we are a town of 658, but 500 is not very good. After all the changes we made last year we were on $20,000 budget last year. I mean, that's, if you're open, so we were open 15 hours a week in 2020. At the end of 2021, we went to 30 because part of the promise when they built the building was to be open more. So we went to a $22,000 budget last year. So when you're talking paying people to work 30 hours a week, your budget is literally nothing for everything else. So like our old library basically was book storage. Last year, we accumulated a lot of books through grants that I applied for really hard, and we got a lot of donations. People knew we were trying to really make changes. So our budget this year is $30,000, so we're doing a little bit better, but it's at 6.7 mils for our town. And I'm in a unique position. I'm actually on the board for Udall's library. I live outside of town. I live in this school district. So our city, you might wonder how that can happen, because I am not a taxpayer to the city of Udall's library. I pay for Sickles, the South Central Library System that you guys are talking about. So I paid 1.229 mils for years to Sickles. And from the history I've seen for our library, up until last year when we were desperate, oh, I didn't tell you this. This new building, this new library.
We are short on time.
Okay, oh, sorry, okay. So we were really short, I'm gonna rush this. This is important. We were really short on money, so we actually had to furnish this library ourselves, so we actually got more Sickles grant money last year. But I'll bet the average money back we get from Sickles is maybe 1/5. And as that person outside of the town, I believe that this is better for our community, that my money goes to our town. Our town is so little, it needs places for our kids, it needs places for our people to go. We have people come in all the time for fax services, print services, to get books, to take art classes that we started. So I think it's really a win-win. And you were saying the taxation's not fair. Well, to me, okay, I believe if you ask our library director, when we advertise for board positions, we advertise everywhere, we beg. I mean, anybody, and right now we have 5 city, two outside of the city by city ordinance. This one would make 4 outside of the city and 3 within the city. And like I said, we beg everybody. I mean, anybody who asks, we'll put them on a list for future positions. It's not like, we're gonna tell them no. So I mean, maybe it's true that it's not the way you're used to as elected, but I'm telling you what, if they want to be on, tell them to come to our door because we will take them. So I don't know I'll go ahead and stop there, but like I said, this is super important for us to maintain ours, and it's literally lower tax base for everyone, because it would be 1 instead of 1.229, and instead of 6.7, it would be 1. And we would also, like she was saying, ours would go to school just like the rec commission in our town does. So, and we would be publishing separate first, and then the school would republish with ours.
Thank you. Committee questions? Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. So I guess I'm just a little curious why the library didn't just partner with the school district.
So our library director, current one, she's here, she actually worked for this. Our school district is our town. Our senior class has roughly 25 people in it. Our school is small. I don't believe it receives any funding. It does not have Sickles. The Sickles support it gets, they're not really eligible because they don't meet the requirements. So basically, we help supplement, like when they're low on books, the kids will come in. So like if the teacher has them read a book and they don't have enough, or the school sometimes doesn't have the books, we'll order them for them. But our current school is not using, I don't believe they fund very much. And like I said, the sickle support is negligible. I mean, she could address that better because she actually worked there for several years, so, as librarian.
Thank you. Committee, any other questions? Well, Monica, I appreciate your passion. I've got several family members and friends that serve on library boards, and I know in rural Kansas, it does serve, especially people that don't have an internet connection. They'll go into their library and use it.
Right.
So understand your plight.
Oh, and just so you guys know, 1 mil in our school district, well, 1 mil in our town's $4,000. So when you go by mills, I'm hoping there's no ceiling because we can't operate off of the same ceilings on mills, so, yeah.
Thank you, Monica.
Okay, well, thank you.
Committee, I would draw your attention to proponent written testimony. Is there anybody else as a proponent? Any opponents on the legislation? Any neutral? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on House Bill 2176. Committee will open the hearing on Senate Bill 300. Thank you, Amelia.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Senate Bill number 300 would decrease the privilege tax rates on banks, trust companies, and savings and loan associations by reducing the normal tax rates. Currently, national banking associations, state banks, trust companies, and savings and loan associations pay a privilege tax that is computed based on a normal tax rate and a surtax on net income. The normal tax is currently at a rate of 2.25%. The surtax is calculated on net income in excess of $25,000, and it has rates of 2 1/8 for banks and 2 1/4 for trust companies and savings and loan associations. This particular bill does not amend the surtax rates, it amends the normal tax rates. The bill would amend KSA 79-1107 to reduce the normal tax rate on banks to 1.94% for tax year 2024 and 1.63% for tax year 2025 and thereafter. The bill would also amend KSA 79-1108 to reduce the normal tax rate on trust companies and savings and loan associations to 1.93% for tax year 2024 and to 1.61% for tax year 2025 and thereafter. And the bill would take effect from and after publication in the statute book, and I would be happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Okay, thank you. Our first conferee is Alex Orrell. Welcome to the Tax Committee.
Good morning, committee. Madam Chair, Vice Chairman Peck, Ranking Member Holland, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to be before the Tax Committee today. I'm very happy to discuss, if I told other committees on other issues, something other than ESG. So thank you for this opportunity, and I truly do mean that. Madam Chair, committee, thank you for the opportunity to give proponent testimony on Senate Bill 300. But before I move forward, I'd like to introduce a special guest I have with me today, Maida Hutchinson. It works in our legal department and is a 2L at Washburn. And she's following us around today and has an interest in government relations. So, thank you for coming with us, Mike.
Tax Committee.
And then obviously you guys know Kelly Van Zoll, our Assistant Vice President of Government Relations, who's the real brains, who you guys all know that one. But thank you to be here on Senate Bill 300. Pretty straightforward. Amelia did a fantastic job outlining the difference in the rates and what the rates would be reduced to. But the nugget of this bill, the reason it is here today is in response to H-sub for Senate Bill 347 last year, which contained ratchet provisions for corporate income tax. As Amelia said, Kansas banks, trust companies, and savings loans pay the privilege tax, which is our income tax. We are not subject to the corporate tax, and the reason for the difference in taxation, if you notice the rates are lower, is because Kansas banks, trust companies, savings, and loans pay taxes on the interest earned from U.S. Treasury agency and securities, where corporate income tax filers do not. So the intent in the difference rate is meant to reflect that difference in taxation. So this would reduce the rate to a corresponding rate reduction that corporate is scheduled to have in tax year 24 and 25. On page 4, on the back of my testimony, you'll see the calculations of compared to corporate income tax. You lower corporate income tax by 0.5%, it's a 7.14% reduction. And then if you lower it by 1%, it's a 14.29% reduction. All we did was apply that same exact reduction to the total bank rate and the total trust and savings and loan rate, and then subtracted the surtax rate to establish that new normal rate. The corporate ratchets is also a normal rate reduction. So right in line, nothing more, nothing less. We're just asking for that same tax treatment. Kansas banks, trust companies, savings, loans are businesses too, corporations too. We're just subject to a different tax. The last point, I got asked about this yesterday, is why is the difference between trusts, savings and loans different than banks? Is because trusts and savings and loans, and I have to go back to the legislative research document from 2021, is allowed a specific deduction on loan loss reserves. I believe it's a 5% reduction or deduction. So that's why they are different in the total rate. But I wanted to address that first and foremost. So we respectfully ask when the committee takes this up, please ask you look at it favorably. We do believe it's the right thing in respect to last year. And the other question I got received is what happened last year? Well, as many of you remember, that bill was signed into law on February 10th. And you all know to get a bill signed on February 10th, that moves through at a lightning quick pace. So this was just, I believe, just left out. So, Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Alex. Committee, any questions? Senator Harlan.
Alex, thanks for being here. I'm not tracking with your policy argument. What does 347 have to do with you guys asking for a tax deduction?
Senate Bill 34, or H sub for Senate Bill 347 was the Apex legislation from last year that contained the ratchet reductions for corporate income. All we're doing in this bill is to establish those same two ratchets that corporate is scheduled to receive over the next 2 years.
I guess my point would be, Alex, I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
No. Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry about that. I guess my point to you back, Alex, would be if it was a parity issue, don't you think the legislature would have included it in 347 last year?
That's a great question, Senator. Actually, over the last couple of years, we've had many conversations with revisors and legislative research about privilege tax and income tax filers, or corporate tax filers. There's times when legislation has moved through this building where, like a tax credit, for instance, would not apply to privileged tax filers. Now we're starting to see all of these tax credit bills. It does include a corporate. It does include a privilege. I do believe it was just a mistake that it was left out, Senator. Now we're starting to see all those bills have both. I believe one of the first bills I worked on was at the KBA was the entrepreneurship tax credit. That was implemented many years ago, and privilege tax was left out of that one. And we came to this committee and came to the legislature to add that into that, and they did. I believe it was extremely overwhelming in both chambers. So all we're asking for is to keep that same thought process when we're talking about tax policy. It is an income tax. It's just our income tax. And frankly, I really don't like the name. It's the privilege of doing business in Kansas. I wish they'd just call it the financial institutions tax. That would make a lot more sense.
Senator Holland.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Look, I very much appreciate our banks in Kansas, particularly our community banks. But I'll be just real frank with you. One of the reasons why I did not vote for the Apex legislation last year was specifically because, in my mind, a special interest had specifically inserted that provision. And it's just another example of arbitrary picking of winners and losers. So, and I would also say, as a bank, we just had SVB go down and Signature Bank, and make no mistake, the federal government stepped in to backstop those depositors. So I would also say that while you have to deal with a privilege tax, you guys are privileged from the standpoint of you do have the federal government stepping in and backing up your customers when the banking industry's practices go awry and other non-financial institution entities don't have that responsibility or that privilege. So anyway, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate
Madam Chair, can I respond to that? Because I believe this is a major issue. I mean, you bring up, SVB. I would direct you to a press release we did put out regarding Kansas banking and the members that we represent. Bottom line, the Kansas banking system is extremely secure and resilient and well capitalized right now. What happened in New York and California is a unique circumstance. You have an institution that put a significant amount of capital on fintech startups. Very risky. I believe it was almost 10%. And then once investors figured that out, they tried to take back their deposits. And come to find out, they were extremely exposed. The bank, they did not have many FDIC insured deposits. Frankly, if Kansas banks were operating in that way, they would have been shut down a long time ago. But I mean, so that is a very unique situation. I think there'll probably be some more institutions nationally that this is going to be a major issue for them. But conventional sound banking practice of having insured deposits, having loan loss reserves, being well capitalized, and having a diversified portfolio works. And unfortunately, with those two, I don't believe they had those. And it's unfortunate because I've had some people make comments just about the banking industry as a whole. There's 4,300 banks in this country. We're talking about 2 that happened. And it is the first 2 that's happened since 2020. So it is concerning, definitely gets people's attention. But I don't believe it is a widespread problem. It is a problem with those banks that have that exposure that really aren't doing conventional banking.
Senator Holland, did you? Okay. Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Alex, for your testimony. And we had a really good conversation yesterday. And with that, like I told you, I'll be researching a little bit more. So I have actually 2 questions, if you don't mind. The first one is, I looked into this document Kansas Legislative Research Department did in January 26, 2021. And I'm just assuming you're familiar with it because I didn't have a chance to send it out as I hoped I would. So on that, on page 2, it said in 1963, it was 5%, and then it was decreased to 4.25% in 1979, and now we're at 2.25%, and now we're going to decrease it even to, let's say, 1.9, and then eventually to 1.6 something. So even though the impact on our state general budget would be close to $6 million. I wonder, and this might be a question for Eddie, I'm not sure, how much that decrease has impacted our budget as far as revenue and into the state budget. Would you have a comment on that piece of it?
I'd have to look. I know what document you are referring to, and that's actually on page 2 when I'm talking about the difference between trusts, savings, and loans. They actually, I think it's in that piece on the second page where it puts that into more detail. The rates that you're bringing up in terms of decreasing, I believe some of those rates that you were talking about are actually the total rate. Maybe not the normal rate, what we're talking about here today. So I'd have to look at the document, and I'll definitely research and come back and chat with you about that. But regarding that piece and the fiscal impact, I think it was 1998, they set it at 4.375 and 4.5. They were taxed at a higher bracket at that point. Well, the reason why the legislature came in and changed that is because we have to pay taxes on something other corporations do not. And so it is equitable tax policy, and that's when the legislature decided to make that difference in taxation. The fiscal impact, like you said, it's 5.8, I believe is what the fiscal note. I'd have to look at revenue back behind me. So in terms of the major impact to the state, I don't believe it has that major impact. And regarding some of the banks that mentioned that Senator Ranking Member Holland mentioned, it's actually a good reason why we need to do everything we can to keep the Kansas banking model strong and have them be the most competitive environment possible to provide the best service to their customers. Because we're not well served just to have 20 banks in the state. We're at 208 headquartered, and many states are trending significantly quicker down that. So in terms of access to credit, we need to do everything we can to sustain that access to credit.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up, so thank you. So I just wanted to show there was a trend that we are going down, and eventually we may end up at 0 because each time there's a new people elected and we tend to go down each time. So I'm just saying there's a trend of decreasing as opposed to increasing. My follow-up question to you is you referenced Apex. And so Apex, and my understanding is it's going to sunset at some point. If this was to move forward, would you also want yours to be sunset at the same time as Apex would sunset?
No, I would not, Senator. And the main reason why is because the ratchets are not sunsetted in the corporate income. The sunset on the Apex program is the program itself to offer those benefit packages to those mega companies or mega projects. So that's the ability for the state to offer those benefits. The thing is, those people or those companies are already getting these benefits already, the ones that are currently working. So those benefits aren't going to sunset on those two projects. They're going to get those benefits long term. So no, I would not be accepting or supportive of putting a sunset on there, because the intent was to help our Kansas businesses that have been here, paying taxes, employing people for many years. It was to provide to give them relief, because we're giving these other companies that aren't from here, well, the first one mainly, to those benefits.
Sorry, I only bring that up because you brought up corporate tax in reference to that, so thank you for your responses.
No problem, Senator.
Madam
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, committee? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Orr, you indicated that you are not the brains behind KBA, but you are the one standing before us. So we frequently have, I've got two questions. I will throw those out, and then you can answer them as one or two. We frequently have disagreement with the fiscal notes that we receive. So question number one, has KBA or yourself looked, do you agree with the fiscal note? And two, if we pass this legislation and we reduce taxes on banks, what would they use the additional money that's in their pocket for? A lot of, when we reduce taxes on taxpayers, they generally put it back into the economy by extra spending. Would the banks then be looking at reducing fees or increasing, doing something else? Those are two questions. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Madam Chair, yeah, thank you. Two great questions regarding the fiscal note. I do believe it's relatively in the ballpark. If you look at Senate Bill 61, there is a fiscal note on that bill. That is the single rate tax bill that looked at reducing it from 7% to 5%. And we applied that same percentage decrease to there, and I believe the fiscal note was 16.8 million. So frankly, if you cut that in half, because that's what we're talking about, you're looking at 8 million fully implemented. So it, probably in that 4.5 to 5.8 roughly probably is in the ballpark. Regarding the tax piece of it, it's a very competitive marketplace, absolutely. There's a lot of institutions in the state. If there is a tax reduction and those banks do not pass on those savings to their members in form of lower fees or lower, interest rates, they'll lose the business, because others will. And that's the beauty thing about the free market, is that people will respond accordingly. And so I do believe our Kansas banks and bankers will pass along these savings. And like I said, trying to do everything they can to survive right now. If you look at the fiscal, or if you look at total privilege tax filers, I believe there's a little over 420, 430 of them. 60 of those fall just under this normal rate. We still have a significant amount of small community banks that employ 3 to 4 to 5 people. And there's a lot of them. Like I said, 60 still fall under that $25,000 deal. So this is really, I'm glad we're looking at the normal rate, because it's really going to help those small community banks that, need every help they can get right now.
Committee, any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I'll draw your attention to written testimony from Sean Mitchell from the Kansas Bankers Association. Anybody else to testify as a proponent? Opponents to the bill? Neutral to the bill? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing on Senate Bill 300. Committee, we are out of time for today. Hopefully we can work some bills this week. We do have PVD queued up tomorrow. I know many of you are receiving questions throughout your district. Some of us, it wasn't just questions, a spur of the moment meeting on property tax, and over 200 people showed up to that meeting. So people are fired up because valuations were sent out recently. So bring your questions and anything that we will also be going over the revenue neutral rate letter probably Thursday to look at legislation on firming that letter up so that when individuals get it, they'll know exactly what it's about. Is there any other business to be brought before the committee? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.